Welcome to another episode of the Silman Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Battisto. We are episode 85. Very excited to announce our next guest is going to be Jimmy Overhiser. Jimmy Overhiser is the new head coach for Mercyhurst College, located in Erie, Pennsylvania. This university just announced its transition to Division I from Division II. Overhiser has made numerous assistant coaching stops since his graduation from Cornell in 2020, including stops at Drexel, Army, Tarleton State, Wisconsin-Whitewater, and Reinhardt. Overhiser is known for building strong rapport with his athletes as well as his work ethic in recruiting. Very excited to have him on the show. Also super excited to announce a couple updates to our show. We now have Simple Man Wrestling t-shirts officially. I've been talking about it for a while, but we finally got these shirts ready to go. Thank you to My House Sports Gear. They're able to make us some gear. So all you need to do is just go into our link tree and you see access to our shop on there. You could also go on to our website at www.simplemanwrestling.com, and you can go to a link on the store that's on there as well. While you are accessing our website and while you're accessing our social media and you're on that link tree, you can also go on HelloFresh.com and you can get up to 10 free meals. All you have to do is just click the link that is located in our link tree, and you can get up to 10 meals, and we get a little bit of a kickback for that. So super excited for what's going on with the show, and I can't wait to bring you guys our next guest, Jimmy Overhiser. Let's get in. Let's get into it. So you came back from junior duel. Was it junior duels?
We're at junior duels now. So
Okay.
I did schoolboy duels last week. It was kind of crazy timing with taking the Mercyhurst job because I got, when I was at U23s, I got the call that I got the job, and I'm like, this is a terrible time to have to talk to Coach Azevedo and let him know that, I'm trying to be a head coach. I guess he knew that I interviewed and stuff, but let him know that I got the job. So, that was bad timing. We were in an Airbnb too. So it's not even like, hey, I'm going to, hop into your room.
You can't go anywhere.
Right.
You're stuck.
And then they're like, hey, well, we want you to start this job on Monday. And I'm like, okay, great. I also would like to start this, but I'm on a schoolboy duels team. And then the next week I'm on a junior duels team. So, I was like, it's going to be a lot, just so I'm not going to be in Erie. I'll be working at night. So a lot of my days have been coaching some kids in the morning, trying to get them some wins, get New York on the map, and then getting back at night, going through compliance things, getting things set up, recruiting calls, scheduling, or even I was on the phone with Duke last week. We'll have a dual meet with Duke this upcoming season. And talking, he was like, Coach, it sounds like you're at a party or something crazy here. And I was like, yeah, it's a party. There's 10,000 12-year-olds around me, and they're all going nuts.
Dude, that's crazy. I feel like it's always when you're busiest, and sometimes just opportunity knocks, and it's just whether you're ready or not, here you come.
Yeah, yeah, that's how it happens. They say when it rains, it pours. And, I think that's pretty true. But it's also, I've heard other people say if you want something done, give it to a busy person. It's like the people that are always busy, they're able to knock things out. So it's better to just stay that way.
So, okay, so let me ask you this. Is one of your first things on the docket, is it going to be getting a new headshot, or are you just going to keep the old one rolling all the way through?
I'm keeping the old headshot. I have not re-upped my headshot since 2022. November of 2022 is my last headshot, and I'm just going to keep rolling with it. People compliment me every year. They say I look young, and I was like, yeah, I do. I'm going to keep working with this headshot. So we're just going to keep rolling with it until eventually someone's like, hey, dude, you don't have hair anymore. You've got a beard now. You got to change this. We're gonna roll with it until I'm forced to stop.
Dude, that's funny. I think so my wife and I were watching Entourage right now. And have you ever seen the show?
I haven't. I've seen the previews and stuff.
You got to check it out. It's definitely a good guy show, but I watch it with my wife. She likes it too. But there's a character named Johnny Drama, and he's close to 40, but he's had the same headshot. He's an actor. He's been acting and using the same headshot since he was early 20s. And he'll show up for auditions, and people are upset because they're like, dude, you look like 15 years older than your headshot.
He looks totally different. Some people, they're good at, just keeping that going. One of my high school coaches, Chris Harrington, I'll throw him under the bus. When he first met his wife, he lied about his age for quite a long time. I don't remember how long. And then one day he left his wallet at her house and, being a little snoopy, she went through it and saw his birthday. It was like, whoa.
Wait, what's the age difference?
I don't know what their difference was, but he's only 5 years younger than my dad.
Well, I meant like he's saying he's one age, but really he's another age.
Yeah. So this story's probably, I mean, it's more, I guess it's 10 years old now. 'Cause he was my coach my senior year of high school. Almost 10 years ago today, I graduated high school. So yeah, it's about a decade old story from when he told me, and who knows how long it happened before that.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, I'm just thinking, I think it's pretty crazy that I'm 28, and he's got a newborn baby. And, I'm like, man, you're only 5 years younger than my dad, and you got a newborn baby. Like, that's kind of crazy life right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think yeah, I don't know. I think everybody's on their own timeline. But
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
sounds like it worked out though.
I just got to throw Coach Harrington under the bus. Maybe the best hair in high school wrestling, but hey, everyone just know he's older than he's telling you.
I feel like you're in a really good spot where you're at right now. You're going to be in Erie, Pennsylvania, and it's like you kind of have like a good pipeline right now with New York because you wrestled there in high school for a little bit. I know you're at Wyoming Seminary as well, but it's
Yeah.
like the different jobs that you've kind of been in both in Pennsylvania and New York. Like you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the location of Mercyhurst to begin with is perfect. You're in the best wrestling state in the country. PA is prime territory. You got to keep those kids home. You got to, there's the other side of the state, like Southeast PA, got some great talent as well. You pull some kids from out there, but Western PA has such good talent, keeping those kids home. As far as like metropolitan areas go, a lot of people argue like Cleveland is kind of like the best, city with wrestling. That's right there. That's 100 miles away, getting those guys. And then you pull the New Yorkers in. I've got deep New York roots, east and west in the state, pulling those kids in, they're close by. So you've got a great like local recruiting range, and you draw an RTC 250-mile radius, like you're pulling a lot of good kids within that RTC radius. So that's the initial target is keep those kids home. And obviously within their circle, they've got a lot of schools as well. So there's a lot of competition, but there's a lot of talent in there too. You see a lot of guys like obviously everyone knows PA and Ohio are deep, but it's like New York produces talent on a high level. Every year at NCAs, there's people, coming out of the woodwork surprising you. There's always the blue chippers, there's the Yannis, the Vitos, the PJ Dukes, but there's always people coming out of the woodwork that, really surprise you. Like my roommate here at Junior Duels is Hunter Richard. I think he was a guy back in the day, not on many people's radar, and he had an awesome career. So I think, New York is kind of not as known for producing guys like that, but they're those guys
Yeah.
exist there. So finding those guys and getting those guys to the next level. So you've got a lot of that around, but I also think with it being a private school, you're able to pull from a large distance as well. They already have a Texas kid on the team, and I think that
Nice.
that reach can go even further. In the past, like at West Point, I loved recruiting California, so I'm gonna look to get back in those California high schools and clubs and get those kids out there. So I'm going to cast a wide net. Priority one is keep those kids home, draw that RTC radius, pull those kids in, and then from there, add that national flair.
Well, I kind of want to go back a second. I feel like one of the kind of like what you mentioned earlier, it's kind of awkward sometimes when you're kind of looking for another job, but you still have a job that you have to do currently. So you're at Drexel, you're making recruiting calls, you're coaching still, and then you're coaching these different youth teams. What was that process, I guess, when you knew or found out this position was opening, and like how'd you kind of go through figuring out if this was something that you wanted to do?
Yeah. So I don't know who told me this, but I'm gonna say it was either Scott Green or Rob Cole. Scott Green and Rob Cole are like my two big mentors. Scott coached me in high school when I was at seminary. I worked with him when I was at Army. Coach Cole's head coach at Cornell when I was there. So I'm always kind of bouncing things back and forth between those two. So it probably came from them, but they told me like, hey, you are where you are until you're gone, right? And you've got to give 100% to that until you're gone. So, it's like at Drexel, maybe looking somewhere else, taking an interview, but it's like you never know how things are going to go. And,
Yeah.
now that I'm a little more connected, I also, I hear that people, oh, this guy or applied and interviewed for this job, and then he applied and interviewed for this job. And sometimes they're doing that and they're still there for 4 or 5 years, right? So you really have to do a great job of right where you are because you never know what's next, or you never know if right there is going to be home for 4 or 5 more years. So you always have to do a great job, even though you might be looking elsewhere. And in, the wrestling world, it's like it is business. As much as, the loyalty card is a part of it, it's like it's our lives. We always got to be looking to improve our careers and make a little bit more money and do the best we can for our families. So, there is, sometimes you're looking out for yourself, but always doing the best for, the circumstance that you're currently in. And the Drexel community was awesome. I absolutely loved working for Coach Azevedo. So even after I told him like, hey, I'm taking the Mercyhurst job, there's a kid from Ohio. I can't name him due to recruiting rules, but it's like he lived an hour from Erie, but a few days before I was going to take the job, I was like, hey, his visit was at Drexel like 3 days before I was going to take the job. And even though he's closer to Mercyhurst, it's my job right now to make sure that he commits here. And he did. An Ohio State finalist committed to Drexel a few days before I was moving significantly closer to him. But that's just the role that you have to do. And that's what I owed to that program was, hey, you guys helped me out. You trusted me. You brought me in to do this job, and I'm going to do everything I can for you. So, it is a little weird sometimes when you're looking elsewhere and it happens in wrestling, but you always have to do the best for where you are. Um, and it's always interesting too, like with doing these schoolboy teams, junior teams, or getting to do Fargo or whatever, because sometimes you're playing numerous or wearing numerous hats. I've had it before as I was at West Point, where I'm coaching Team New York, and an athlete who was committed to West Point was across the line from us. And I was like, hey, man, I'll be in your corner soon, but for now, we're enemies. So sometimes things get a little weird in wrestling and how things work. But at the end of the day, like the wrestling community is always awesome. And it's always fun to get to do all these things.
Yeah, and I think it's good too, like never burning bridges, like always trying to network and get to know people. It's like, on the other hand, it's like you never know what's going to happen in the sport, whether it's a job or a kid enters the transfer portal, and you kind of have that relationship with them already. It's like it just makes things a little bit easier. And I love wrestling, man. Like I think I first started following you on Twitter after you went to Tarleton, just because I have that connection with Grant Leaf. And yeah, it's cool. It's cool finally getting a chance to have you on and talk.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I know Grant was on before, he's really enjoyed it and got to listen to some that he's done.
yeah, so he's doing some crazy stuff, man. He did like a stand up. He opened for man, I always forget his name, but he talks a lot of like
Greg
wrestling
Warren.
jokes. Yeah, yeah, dude. Is that something you're thinking about when you're thinking about maybe like some out of the box kind of ideas, like trying to
Yeah.
get this Mercyhurst train going?
So it's definitely something I'm thinking about. And I bounce some of these things off of Grant because he is much more the creative of us. He's one of my best friends. He was in my wedding. We talk all the time. It was awesome to get to work with him. But he's much more the creative. At Stanford, we did a gala, it was a very like professional type event. And then he was like, hey, we could take that, we can make it a comedy show. He's like, I'm friends with Greg Warren. We could make this happen. But he's got a lot of those ideas. He's making a shoe right now. So,
Yeah.
everyone should go check out his shoe. His shoe is awesome. I got a pair, you can pre-order them. They're incredible. But, he's a big thinker. I'm a little more the realist. So when we were working together, it was like, hey, he's out here throwing around these ideas. It's my job to try to grab the ones I think are really viable and, make them happen. But now that I'm kind of running my own ship, it's like I'm calling him. I'm like, hey, here's how I'm looking at this. And again, I'm a little more realist. I'm kind of in the box. I'm like, help me get out of the box a little bit here. And he's been pretty helpful in the process so far. And even in the interview process, I was calling him like, hey, what would you ask? I've interviewed for assistant jobs before, but if you were an AD, what would you be asking me right now? So he's helped me with a lot of things. But again, his brain just works different, where he's so creative and outside of the box. And some of the things, like a thing he says, is he just grabs all the darts and throws them. And if you throw enough darts, you're going to hit a bullseye.
I mean, it's just like wrestling. It's like you take enough shots, like you might get to the leg at some point and then be able to
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, that's like a lot of Grant's perspective on things is he's creative and he's going to try a lot of things and he's going to figure out what works. And you know, a lot of what's in wrestling, you see it in the techniques. Like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you just got to, hey, this worked for that guy. I could take it. I could refine it. So it's like, you're always kind of copying, stealing some things. Again, he did the comedy show, but it was started with Rob doing the gala event at Stanford. So you're always kind of playing off someone else or seeing what could work for you and tweaking. There's a lot to it, but that's kind of what I love about this job is you can get creative in the techniques of wrestling, but you can also get creative in how you go about the job and what positions you create and what people you bring in and what they can bring to the table. There's just so much you could do with it.
Yeah, and anything can be replicated. Like, I'm always also trying to look at other sports too. Like one
Yeah.
of my favorite coaches to study is Dan Lanning, who coaches at Oregon. He's the head coach for Oregon. That was actually his first head coaching job. But his path actually kind of reminds me of you a little bit. Like, kind of would go to all these different places around the country and would kind of build his coaching resume. And he actually was, I think, maybe like a linebacker coach and was making pretty good money at his school and took a significant pay drop, but he went to go be a grad assistant at Alabama under Nick Saban. And from there, he went and got a promotion there and then went to Oregon for his first job. So I think it's always trying to look, like you said, sometimes outside the box and even in other sports. Because again, if you can take something and just try to apply it, it's almost like a superpower.
Yeah, I think football's a big one too, because football's always at the cutting edge, right? It drives NCAA sports and in America just drives sports in general. So, something I've asked before, and even just like, hey, we're ordering new envelopes or we're ordering new letters when we write letters, like, what do
Yeah.
you want? Well, what's football doing? What does football have? Because it's like whatever I think of, football's already two steps ahead, right? So it's like sometimes you can cut to the chase by being like, okay, I'm thinking about, these options, but what's football doing? Because they probably have the premier option right now, and I could just copy and paste.
I wonder why football is. I mean, I think maybe it's just because it's kind of a focal point for a lot of our sports. But at the same time, it's just like most football teams have a lot of people on them and a lot of support staff that go with it. And when you
Yeah.
have that many more people, it's like just more ideas are being brought to the table. Not all of them are good, but it's like you said earlier, what Grant was saying. You throw enough darts at the dartboard, eventually something's going to stick.
Yeah. I do. Yeah. I think they got so many guys working for them. I think a little bit too is they drive the culture. So whatever they do is going to be cool.
Yeah, for sure. So when you are applying for this job, are you kind of like bringing some ideas like, hey, like if I get this position, like this is what, I want to do right away? Are you kind of selling them on the long-term vision? I guess like how much did you know about Mercyhurst kind of going into it? And then what was kind of like, all right, this is what I'm going to do if I get this job and once I'm here.
Yeah, so I knew a little bit about it. It's like I grew up 2 hours away from it. I knew it existed. I knew some people went there. But it's like I'd never like competed against them or even saw them at tournaments or anything. So I kind of just knew they existed, was able to do like, the Google level research. But before I interviewed, I got in contact with their assistant coach. Got some intel from him, contacted some alumni, got some intel from them, and just from there drew the picture of what it was or the best picture I could. And I put together a game plan, knowing that it was going to be tweaked. I was going to get new information, learn new things, and it was going to be tweaked. But even before I walked into the interview, I put together a mock schedule for the next 4 years, right? Like knowing in this transition period, but also transitioning coaches, we've lost a lot of athletes, we've lost a lot of talent. Like, hey, this upcoming year is going to be lighter. We have to have some D1 competition in there, right? We have to show recruits who we're competing against, but we also have to make our current team better. But at the same time, we have some not Division 1 competition in there so that our guys are, competing at a good level where they're going to get some good wins. They're going to have some tough matches. They're still pushing themselves. They're still motivating. So especially for guys who are juniors and seniors in this transition who are never going to get to see the Division 1 postseason. I want them to be able to see, some light in their career. So something like adding NCAA nationals, or some people call it club nationals, in there, is like a big thing for them. We have one senior on the team and he's going to get to end his career at a national tournament. So, I added some stuff in there early on. And then the next year, you make it a little bit tougher. And then once we're postseason eligible, I mock up what I want that to look like. And, kind of my idea for that is you play to what earns you a bid, right? What can earn you a bid is right top 30 RPI. 70% coaches rank, or 70% win percentage, and then top 30 in the coaches rank, right? So I'm like, hey, obviously we're going to have some tournaments close, right? You get up your win percentage at things like the Edinburgh Open, the
Yeah.
Clarion Open, but then we're going to need to hit some big teams, right? And we're close to some big teams right there, right? Like we're not far from Ohio State, right? We're not far from Penn State, and teams like that obviously can really jump up your RPI, but it's also the opportunity to get some ranked wins. So, I tried to draw out that third and fourth year schedule or postseason eligible to where it would lead our average starter to hit those goals of 70% top 30, top 30. So again, roughly drew that out, showed that to them, explained to them like how the qualification system worked because they had no idea. And then the other thing I knew that they were stressing about was what conference are we going to be? Where are
Yeah.
we going to go into? Where do we fit? And it's not that I have the perfect answer right now, but it was that like, hey, I know this coach who's leading this conference, and I'm going to connect with him, or we're going to chat about ideas and what a schedule might look like and figure out what our budget would be. And then, I know the commissioner of the IWA. We're going to chat with him, see what it takes to go there, what that schedule would look like. And I just went in with all of that knowledge. And I think actually the AD said that's what he was most impressed with when he asked me about conference, because I hadn't spoken to him before that interview, just the associate AD. He mentioned the conference thing, and I came in with ideas, and he said he was really impressed with my knowledge. But it was really that, I knew that that was a stressor for them. So I
Yeah.
was able to talk to some important coaches and people beforehand to go in with a game plan and be like, hey, I can't promise anything, but here's connections that I have that are going to help us get closer to this goal.
And I think for them, all their other sports are going into a conference where it's a non-wrestling conference, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, where do we best fit? I feel like EIWA would be probably the natural assumption if they're accepting affiliates. Um,
Yeah. So
probably worst case scenario would be like Pac-12, where you have to travel to all these dang
I
places.
I threw that out in the interview. So that was a wild card. I think geographically the most natural fit's the MAC.
Okay,
You've
yeah,
got
Mac would be up there.
Buffalo's 100 miles away. Kent State's like 60 to 70. Edinburgh's basically home. Clarion's like 40 miles away. So you got all those teams pretty close. And actually, what's kind of funny about the EIWA, if you look at it, every team has access to I-95 except Binghamton and Bucknell.
Yeah,
So
that makes it easy to travel.
yeah, which it's kind of weird, like when you look at it on a map. So, geographically, that one's a little different, but it's like kind of the sell is like, hey, well, if you have to travel to wrestle us, then you could do that pairing it with a Clarion Open, Edinburgh Open. They have three of those now, three Clarion Opens. So that could be paired at many times. Or again, Kent State, Buffalo is close. Pitt's not too far away. So a lot of people you could pair it with if you had to come out to Erie for a conference duel. And then same thing for us, if we had to travel to the other side of Pennsylvania, it's like, well, we can get 2-for-1s in there, both in conference and out of conference. Like we could hit a Drexel and Penn, or a Drexel and Lehigh, or even throw Ryder in there. So, I think that plays into it, where if you've got the other side where we get to stay at home for our conference because our schedule is Edinburgh, Kent State, Clarion, then it's like, well, our out of state or our out of conference is going to be LIU and Hofstra, right? Like that's a great trip. Or Army and Columbia, we're going out that way. You can get some easy 2-for-1s. The
Yeah,
Pac-12 thing was interesting because they're in another scenario where they need teams. And I was like, man, I don't know like what a deal would be, but maybe
maybe.
there's some incentives or something. I floated that. It's probably not realistic at all, but it was floated in the interview.
I mean, you could set it up to where, you know, you go out there and you make it maybe more like a trip. Like you come out to California, you do some recruiting if you're trying to build your recruiting base there. Maybe keep like a short contract. Like I think Little Rock's deal, I think was like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But um, but then I don't know if I was going to join the Pac-12 as a non-affiliate school, I'd be like, you got to let us host a conference tournament at least at some point in the
That'd
next
be
few
crazy.
years.
The Pac-12 tournament in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, well, so I wrestle at CCB, and they're a non-affiliate school as well, and we never got to host. We never got to host it. They stopped doing it, I think, in like 2009 or 2010, maybe even before that. And I don't know. I think it seemed like there's a little bit of we got our nose in the air, and
Yeah.
we don't need you guys. And then Boise State dropped their program, and they're like, shoot, we need to get more affiliates on board. So I don't know. And I think again with this time of conference realignment, like it's interesting hearing how Mercyhurst as they're transitioning. It's like they're concerned about that as well. Like that was one of their bigger concerns. But it seems like, there is a few different options that you guys can kind of go down, and you have some time to kind of figure it out, right? How long
Yeah.
is the transition between D2 and D1? It's like 3 or 4 years, isn't it?
So traditionally it's 4 years, but they submitted some sort of waiver. I don't fully understand the process, but they got theirs down to 3 years.
Nice.
So our first NCAA championship will be 2028. So we've got a little bit of time, but also, I wasn't really like rushing. I'm still not rushing because, like you said, like the conferences, they're always in chaos. Had they transitioned 2 years ago, Sacred Heart was still in the NEC, right? That could have been a wrestling conference at that point. That could have been 3 teams. There's also talks of another conference happening on the East Coast. Now there's potential for a conference on the West Coast. There are other conferences that could emerge, and it would be at the demise of some other conferences. But there's always going to be movement at this point, and it's just rolling with the punches. And I do think John Clark mentioned to me, he's a fellow New Yorker. He's been helping me out. He mentioned to me, he's like, some of these schools, they're lucky that they're in the conference that they're in with the affiliation that they have. But, if something changes, they could find themselves, really, really struggling. So he's like, everyone being in where they are right now is lucky. And as things change and shift, you never know kind of where the powers are going to go. It's like right now, everyone's a little scared for the Pac-12. But if you were talking about Pac-12 sports maybe a decade ago, you're like, oh, they're thriving, like they're trying to
Yeah.
steal Texas, they're trying to steal Oklahoma. So everyone in the position they're in might be a little comfortable, but just one move can change everyone's scenario.
Yeah, for sure. And I think things are always, like you said, always things are kind of changing. When you think about what these next 3 years are going to look like, I know obviously a big part of coaching at the collegiate level is recruiting. Like that's a very important part of it. I one of my good friends, Derek Moore, coaches at CBU, took over the program right before they started their transition to D1, and had some guys were like, well, we don't want to sit for a few years, and they transferred out. How does this next 3 years, I guess, look like with recruiting, as well as maybe selling the guys that are already here on, hey, this is what our future is going to look like? How do you get these guys maybe to buy into, the future?
Yeah, so I'll start with the guys that are currently on the team. Again, there are those juniors and seniors on the team it's not in the cards for them. They will finish their careers, and the Division I NCAA tournament is just not in the cards. It's not an option for them. So I've already had all the one-on-one calls with them. Just like, hey, what are we looking for out of this? Like you understand that this isn't in your future. What can I do as a coach to make your career still feel valuable to you? And one thing I got is that, and this was something unexpected to me, is that they want to compete in dual meets again, which, dual meets was something I was going to schedule anyway, but it was something that last year they felt like they really missed, like having that team atmosphere, being able to cheer on their team, or like being in a gym that was focused on one mat. Like that was something that they really missed, that they thought was going to add value to the end of their career. And they didn't even propose the NCAA nationals thing. So when I brought it up to them, like they were thrilled, even though it wasn't D1. They're like, wait, you're telling me I could end my career in March and not February? Like, that's awesome. Like, that's meaningful. So those guys are excited about that, and I feel that they're really on board with that. But for future recruits, what's easy, the class of 2026, what's now the current senior class, now that school is done, they can come in, they can redshirt, and then their redshirt freshman year were postseason eligible. So the selling point got a lot easier. I think what a lot of people sell in wrestling, and I think it's the right thing to sell, is access to the NCAA tournament. And now that class of 2026, we're not restricting that access at all. Where every year, through a transition, it gets harder. And I think, like, shout out to Coach Shuck at Bellarmine. I think he had an awesome transition at Bellarmine where he was able to get some guys who were willing to go in as freshmen and sacrifice 2 years or 1 year to NCAA nationals, and not get their full career at the Division I postseason. But he was able to do that really, really well. And now you see in year one of eligibility, they had two qualifiers and they had a really, really tough team. And they're going to be like SoCon title contenders. So, maybe pulling in some transfers. I'm working on some late 2025 so that, like, hey, you're still going to get 3 Division I postseasons. That's still going to be a good career. We're going to get you ready for that. These next 2 years going to prepare you for that. But for the class of 2026, they're going to have full access to the NCAA tournament, which is awesome. And I think that's the biggest thing.
And I would even say some of these guys that you could get through this group that are in the portal right now, it's like, why don't you see this as an opportunity to come and just develop? Come in and develop. You can still compete, at the U.S. Open and U23s and U20s, and you can still get some big events. But just see it as like you get another redshirt year almost. It's like, yeah, it's like what you said. It's like you're trying to sell opportunities to go compete at the national tournament, the national tournament, but it's like you still get a postseason, like you still get to train. But dude, this is like I think once in a lifetime opportunity to come in and be a part of the foundation of something that's new and exciting. So it's like whatever this experience is, it's whatever you make it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome. And being a part of the first two is so cool. Like when, obviously the program has had history before, but there is going to be a line in that sand, like, hey, here's where things changed, and you're going to be a part of that first photo, right? They've got all the photos of every team in history up on that wall. But we'll make something a little different, whether the photos get a little bigger, whether the background's a different color. But like, hey, when that change happens in the photo, like you're going to be in the first one, which is going to be really cool. And you're going to kickstart all of the history that happens after. So you're right. I think that's an awesome opportunity to be able to be the ones that come in, especially with it being a smaller team now. Like I said, transitions are tough. A lot of people leave. So you're really coming in with a fresh slate. Anyone that comes in now, they're able to be leaders right away, have the opportunity to be starters right away, have the opportunities to create the culture and really be like, wow, I'm the one that started that culture. I'm the one that started that tradition. And I think that's a really cool opportunity to have.
So I obviously, Mercyhurst has some really good history. I think they finished fourth, maybe in like 2016 or something like that, and have had all Americans since then. Kind of went down, I think, a little bit, post COVID, but still some great teams and some great individuals. During this process, like, has there been any like alumni or like people that you've communicated with all like about this job?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one for me was reaching out to Coach Whaler,
Yeah.
right? And understanding like he's still there. He's in the community and he's willing to help, which is awesome. I think one thing I've seen with some other coaching changes is the new coach immediately comes in and tries to get rid of any trace of the old coach. And what I've told the team, told some alumni, and told Coach Whaler is like, you built something awesome. You had national champs. You had dozens of All-Americans. Like that's incredible. And I don't want to erase any of that. I want to keep that momentum going and I want to build on that. I want to keep him a part of the program. And, he's had awesome alumni support in the past, good donation numbers, things like that. And I don't want to throw any of that away. I want to keep him and everything he's built, as a part of the program, and include especially those alumni who, when I think of my time at Cornell or my time at seminary, whatever it was, the main memories I have, like I think of Cornell, I think of Rob Cole. When I think of Wyoming Seminary, I think of Scott Green. So I think if I go in and I try to, erase like the Whaler era, I'm erasing the core memory of all of those alumni. And, it's like, I think that would be a very bad way to go in and start things. So I'm trying to keep Coach Whaler around, trying to keep those alumni connected. And it's not just like, hey, we need fans, we need donations. They built something awesome. And I'm just trying to grow off from it. They have a great foundation. I'm just going to see how high I can build it.
As part of the process to maybe get that alumni support, I mean, are you thinking like, hey, not just come out and watch dual meets, but like, let's have a social or like, let's do a camp and bring some of these alumni back. I'm not sure what the compliance rule is if it's at the club level, but they're allowed to come to practice and even roll around with some of the guys.
Yeah, so any alumni can come into practice on an occasional basis.
Yeah.
It's a weird, undefined rule, like how often is occasionally. So any alumni can come into a practice on an occasional basis. Yeah, but I plan on involving them, and I think you do that in many ways, right? Socials where they get to meet me, but also get to interact with the student athletes that are currently on the teams. I think a big thing in keeping people connected in wrestling is they need to know the names.
Yeah.
So like even when I left high school and left college, like my mom would continue to watch. right? But it gets harder for her because she's like, well, I don't know these people anymore. But it seemed that for the first 4 years I was out of high school, she would still watch high school wrestling because she knew the people's names. And the
Yeah.
first 4 years I was out of college, she would still watch because she knew the people's names. So, I think knowing who they are, even if it's not much, you just know their names, you met them once, you shook their hand, you're definitely more, you know, like willing to watch them and you're more into it. So I think having those events, whether it's a social where you get to shake their hand or even like, hey, that wrestler was at the golf outing. He was selling raffle tickets, and he got me to buy 20. He really got me, and I think those connections make those alumni more willing to come to matches, buy
Yeah.
t-shirts, donate, go to NCAs to watch them. So I think that's important, not only just for them to meet me and get connected with me, but get connected with the teams. At the end of the day, it's those guys that really matter, when I'm calling, say, hey, we need to go to Vegas. This guy can make the U20 world team. We got to give him a shot at this, but we need some money. That's not about me. And that's not about them liking me. That's like, hey, support this athlete. That's about them. And this athlete. You met this athlete.
Yeah, especially if you got alumni there in different industries, like even just in Bakersfield, like it's like well, actually, probably just a handful of industries. We got like finance, firefighting, police, and teaching. That's like probably most of our alumni in town are doing in Bakersfield. But I'm always on the lookout. Like if I'm interacting with guys and they want to hey, they want to be a teacher, yeah, man, like let me introduce you to some people, and get some calls going and try to set you up with an interview. It's the same thing. Like, there's a bunch of guys that want to get into, we call it like wildland, but like they go out in nature and they basically fight fires in nature and stuff like that. It's like, it's a great opportunity. So, just trying to get these guys hired so they stay in town and are able to kind of get back and just add to the wrestling community in town.
That's been one of my favorite things to do. So I think Coach Cole is the master at it. Right? I don't think I could possibly be better than he was at it. He even created a website for it. Because he was doing it so much, like just plugging people together, like, hey, you should meet this guy, you should meet that guy, that he created a Cornell alumni database. So then he could just be like, oh, you're interested in this? Just type it in the database. It's going to come up with 300 alumni. You could sort them out by location and this and that. Like, he was the master of it. But in my young career, it's something I really enjoyed doing. They're I don't want to say low percentage shots because they're higher percentage than cold calling someone. But it's like, hey, I've got this connection. It may not work out with their company, but at least I can get you an interview. I can get you a foot in the door. And I've got some former teammates or even athletes who I've coached. Their parents are in an industry who like. I've got a few people who like, man, it hasn't worked out, but they're always willing to give an interview. Like, shout out to Brian Robuto. He was quite a bit older than me. I think we were only in a team 1 year together. But any kid who I've had who I'm just like, this kid's really smart, I'm always like, you should interview with Brian. Like, see if he's got anything for you. And Brian is always like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna get him an interview. Let's see what we can do. And that there's just guys like that who are always willing to come through and like give things a shot. So I always appreciate guys like that. But it's also like they probably had that at some point when they were an athlete as well. Like, hey, I had an alumni or a connection, like willing to meet me halfway and see how things would work. And, a lot of times wrestlers are always willing to give back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's such a humbling sport. I think it's kind of what you said. You think a lot of your experiences kind of revolve around your coaches, and your coaches put a lot of time into you. So it's like whether you're coming back and you're coaching or you're giving or you're donating your time somehow, it's like you got to give back. Like you got to pay it forward. You got to be grateful for people that have given you a lot to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that question sometimes because obviously I live in Pennsylvania now. My USA wrestling card says I'm a Pennsylvanian. People are like, why are you coaching Team New York? And, obviously there's a recruiting aspect to it, but it's also like, these are my guys, like Coach Harrington was my high school coach. Scott Green was my high school coach. Like this is, where I grew up. And when they asked me for some help, like that, I'm there for them. I'm giving back to them because they did it for me. And, as much as again, it helps me as well. I'm there for them because they were for me.
For sure. When you look at like just the area surrounding Erie, you talked about, maybe eventually build in RTC. What's kind of the wrestling situation just in that little pocket where you guys are at now? Like, what's the club's situation? What's the high school situation?
Yeah. So, there's some good wrestling around. Like, do you just think some big names in D1, like Carter Strachey's from Erie, right? The only ever five timers from right there is from Cathedral Prep. We've actually got a kid on the team from Cathedral Prep. So, he doesn't really know him. He's a lot younger, but he used told some stories like, oh, it's pretty cool. Carter's come back and he showed me X, Y, and Z. Panero Johnson's from there.
Yeah.
A little more obscure one though is like Dorian Crosby NCAA qualifier. So one thing, I'm looking for as well in our young program is when you have really talented wrestlers out there, and something like Dorian, it's like sometimes if things ever go wrong, the first thing you think of is I need to go home, right? So part of this, and you mentioned it earlier, like never burning bridges, is like being in a really good wrestling area. Part of it is like people might jump on bigger schools sooner, right? And that's great, right? If you're gonna go choose, a Big Ten, Power Four, Power Five school right away. But just keeping the bridge or the, line open with them. Hey, if things ever go wrong, you're welcome to come home. So I think that's a big thing. But I've talked to some club coaches out there, something I've considered is do I want to start, my own club, like not just RTC, but, have like the local sports club going out of Mercyhurst as well. And, that's something I'm not sure of right now, but it's like, do I want to dive into that? How broad am I going to try to make this scope? But the high school wrestling around is incredible. And even a lot of the AA schools around, I'm kind of from a small town, so I like to lean into those small towns around. So you maybe don't see as much concentration of talent in those schools, but you see some really good guys come out of those AA schools, which a lot of those schools around there, they're from some smaller towns, but they've got some good talent. So looking to keep those kids home, but it's a great wrestling situation. Obviously, the Whippeal's storied, not too far away at all.
I think too, like a lot of these kids, like even if they don't, go off and be Division I wrestlers, it's like these families and these kids, like if you do end up having a kids program, like these are the kids that come out and watch you, or watch the team
Yeah.
perform. Like these are the people that show up to camps. They show up to socials and they hang out. I mean, that's your base, and it's like who knows what happens after that. Chris Harris is probably one of my favorite coaches to study, and I was very fortunate to have him on the podcast. But he was talking about one of his goals when he was at Princeton. He had a couple, which I'll share with you. One of them was like he wanted to see more cauliflower ear at the local Starbucks.
Yeah.
Just turning it into a wrestling town, which again, you're in Pennsylvania, it's a little bit different. But being in an area where maybe it's not super known for wrestling in particular, but just kind of being around it more and just seeing that more and having it be a part of the town's culture. Um,
Yeah.
he had another like weird thing, which it kind of threw me off. He's like, one of his goals at Princeton was to be 500 in duels because that means they had like a very balanced schedule. But I feel like most coaches don't really have that kind of perspective. Like we want to make sure we're losing dual meets as well as one of them.
Yeah. No, I like both of those. It's funny. We wrestled Clarion this last year when I was at Drexel, and we went like 30 minutes down the road and stopped at a Sheets. And the guy that was checking us out, like ringing us out at the Sheets, was like, "Oh, hey, I just called your dual meet at Clarion." And we're like, "Wait, what? Like, how did you even get here? And you started working so fast like that." So, kind of funny, little small little wrestling area. The guy that was, calling the match for him. So I think that was a wrestling night in America. So on Flow, it was Shane Sparks, but they had like another, like commentator, the guy actually on the mic was also working at Sheets that we stopped at. So kind of similar to that, seeing more cauliflower at the local Starbucks. But that's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting to think that, you do maybe not plan on losing, but you schedule some matches that are maybe a little over your head. And it's an interesting thing to think about. And it's something that some of your guys need, if not all of your guys need. And getting ready for that postseason, you're going to need it. And I think it also, depends on where you're at. I don't think Penn State schedules too many of those duels where they're thinking that way, but it depends on where you're at. But you need that for the growth, and if you don't need that growth in the moment, it's because you had that growth at a different point in life for sure.
Yeah, and you need to have opportunities where you're going to get, pressure. It's we were talking about just with our coaching staff, just bottom. We sometimes struggle with the hand fighting. And it's not even like if we ask kids like, "Hey, what do you do here?" They'll tell you exactly how to do it. But as soon as we start going live, it's like sometimes the wheels kind of fall off the car a
Yeah.
little bit, and it's like
One,
we need to kind of find that sweet spot and spar and kind of add pressure and stop and fix things as we go.
yeah. Couple things I want to do. At Army, this would happen. This is like, I'm sure it happens a lot of places. But there was actually an emphasis on like, hey, while their team's jogging, like two guys jump in the middle, go for a takedown, and I think some people see that as like, hey,
Wait,
that's
hold on. While their team's jogging?
so like, yeah, like, end of practice, the team is cooling
Oh,
down,
got it.
getting two guys to jump in the middle and going for a takedown. And I think like, some people see that as like, oh, like that's like a pee-wee thing. But Coach Ward would say like, hey, this is training for pressure, right? You've got, maybe it's not 1,000 eyes on you, but you've got 45 guys watching you right now, and no one wants to be taken down in front of their teammates. Like this is training for pressure. So I think that's something I'm going to implement. Uh, the other thing I was thinking of, and this is definitely off the wall, I haven't seen other people do this. A lot of people, they read like a motivational quote or something before practice, or they give a little speech. One thing I want to make everyone on our team do is read to the rest of the team before practice. I think a lot of people are scared of public speaking. They're definitely scared of reading out loud. I want to make our guys do that before practice. I don't want it just being me Googling something, regurgitating. I want our team to read in front of each other before practice and have it, you're practicing that pressure, but also hopefully the passage in that is meaningful to them as well. And maybe a little more meaningful because it's not just me saying it to them.
Yeah, well, it sounds different. It sounds different when it comes from a teammate. And I think too, I like that idea a lot because it kind of puts them on the spot. But it's like part of the wrestling room is being uncomfortable and learning how to deal with it. And it's like, would you rather learn how to be uncomfortable under a spotlight with thousands of people watching, or would you rather learn how to be uncomfortable in front of, like you said, like 40 something guys that are your friends, like they care about you and they want to see you succeed. So, that might be a little bit harder off the cuff, but
It might,
I think the logarithm might be better.
yeah, right now it's just an idea. Check back in a year. I'll let you know how it went.
All right. I think so. They didn't make us do this. It wasn't hazing, but there was an expectation where if you were a freshman at CCB, our coaches would make you tell a joke. And I don't mean to brag, but I had a really good joke to the point where it was like, all right, every single day I had to have a joke. I had to have a joke to tell the team, and if I didn't, our one of our assistant coaches, Riley Orozco, was like, all right, have a joke? You better have one tomorrow. So like I always had to have a joke like on me. So it's like I
Yeah,
just have
you got to be
jokes.
ready at all times. We did that at Cornell. I think that tradition has since died out, but that was a thing. And joke of the day. Um, I was really reserved. I wasn't much of the jokester, so I told one joke in my career, but I am honored to say it was a hit.
I bet you have a pretty dry sense of humor.
Oh, it's definitely like at West Point, a lot of kids would say like, "Oh, you're just the second coming of Green." Like, it's definite dad humor. Josiah Queen would always tell me like that I'm very corny. He reminded me often that I'm not funny while laughing at my jokes.
I mean, yeah. Well, I were you there? You were there when Steve Blyce was there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's got a big personality, man. Like he
Oh
gets
yeah.
he gets after it. So I think it's part of it's like who you're with. Like if somebody's super loud, like you might match it, or you might like be a little more calm to kind of balance everybody out.
I think that's why I am the way I am. I was the youngest. I ended up when I was 10 having a younger sibling, but for 10 years I was the baby. Very talkative siblings. And so I had to be really good with just like the quick one-liners. You know, I might not be great with the long stories or anything, but just like the quick one-liners, the observational humor, I was well trained in.
Well, plus too, like you said, you're the youngest. How many older siblings did you have?
Two.
So you got two older siblings. I mean, are they that much older where like they can kind of bully you and pick on you a little bit?
Yeah. So I
Uh,
had my brother's 10 years older, and then my older
okay.
sister's 2 years older. So
Okay.
it's definitely like, older brother, and he wrestled. I always thought he was like the coolest guy. I always wanted to be him. Um, and then, sister was just old enough, and she's bigger. I'm 5'5", I'm little. My sister was 5'10". So
What
like
happened?
I have no idea what happened. But given that she was 2 years older and significantly bigger, she could beat me up most of my life. By the time I got to the point where I could like defend myself, it was totally inappropriate to do so. So I never got my licks in. So like it always had to be emotional.
Yeah, you got to be able to hold your own somehow, if
Yep.
not physically.
Yep. So humor, defense mechanism.
I think John Smith was talking about how, like, when he was a kid, he would travel all these tournaments and just whoop on guys, but like he couldn't get a takedown against his sisters in the living room.
That's tough. That's a tough goal.
Yeah.
Might be the toughest guy in the country, but not in your own house sometimes.
No, against your sisters too. Um, I kind of want to back up a sec. So I was looking at your bio, and you got your degree in architecture, right? Was that like, was that your initial plan? Is that you wanted to be like an architect? And at
Yeah,
what
so like
point
the
were you like, I'm
concentration of
switching
it,
to
it's
going to
in
coach?
urban planning, but
Okay.
it's all in one college there, and there's a little bit of everything in there. So it was kind of just weird. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My idea is just like, I want to go to the Ivy League. I want to be rich. Like that was as
Let's
much as
go.
I had put the thought into it. It's like, I'm going to go to Cornell. I'm going to be rich. Well, how's that going to happen? I don't know. It's just going to happen. That's what happens when you go here, right? And so, talking to Coach Cole, and he's trying to throw all these different things at me. Like, would you be interested in this? Would you be interested in that? What are you thinking for career? And there was a point where he was just like, do you want to do something no one's ever done before? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Give me something that no, he's like, I have never had a wrestler get accepted into this school before. And so I was like, all right, let's go. I'm going to be the first one. And I was the first wrestler accepted in the School of Architecture, Art, and Urban Planning. So I did that. And then as I was about halfway through, and I was like, I'm definitely not going to do this. Like, I don't think this is fun, like at all. So I think I'm going to coach. I'm like, I don't know if there's something that's going to help me here. Do I get a degree in education so I could maybe teach and coach? At that time, I wasn't thinking of college. And I was, talking to some Cornell advisors and stuff. And they're like, well, if you switch to, X, Y, or Z, that's going to add time onto your degree. You're going to have to be here a sixth year. And I was like, whoa, 5 is plenty. So I was like, nothing directly correlates to help coaching. Like, I'm just going to finish this out. And since then, there's been a couple other guys who've gone through it. Chris Foca was one of them. So, honored to have helped him, made it through as well. But yeah, I think we had a few pioneers around my age. I'm not sure if he was the first, but it might have been the first in a while. Like Derek Krajewski might have been the first to go the ILR route. And then that became like a pretty popular thing on our team. So yeah, we had a couple pioneers around my age as far as exploring different academic revenue or avenues at Cornell.
When you say you helped Chris Foca, you mean like you tutored him?
No, not that much. Not that much. He's a good bit younger than me. I think I don't even know if he
You,
was
you didn't
under.
like slip him some assignments or anything, right?
Yeah. I did leave every book I ever bought at Cornell. I left. Uh,
Nice.
in my room, I left every single book I ever bought, like I don't need him, and I did leave them there. So I'm sure at some point they were dispersed and helped someone. Uh, but no, just, I think it's cool that I went through and, I mapped out like, hey, like this is doable. Because there was not other athletes in that college, like I would look around class and you could just tell like, hey, these people are not hitting the gym after, like they've never been hit in the face before, they're just not that type of people. So, there was even times where I was like starting it and I was like, I don't know if this is a viable thing. But by the time I made it through, gave them the green light, like, hey, Rob, like, yeah, we can do this. This is an avenue that people can go. And even it was interesting because, part of it being urban planning, I'm from a town of 400 people. We don't have a red light. And it's not like I've heard some people be like, oh, I'm from a small town, I'm from 40 minutes outside of Philly. I'm like, no, like I'm from a small town that's 2 hours from Rochester, 3 hours from Buffalo, an hour and a half from Binghamton. Like I am from the middle of nowhere. So, they'd be like, write a paper on how you would improve public transportation. I was like, improve it? I've never been on it. So then I was like trying to like find ways. I'm like, okay, well, I know Cornell has a bus route. Now I got to find a way to get on this Cornell bus route so I can critique it. Where for Foca, it made a little more sense where he was like, he's from North Jersey. He's taken public transportation. He's done these things. He's been in a city to maybe plan one a little better. Where I was like, man, I don't know. We've got one time they put a blinking red light in where the main stop sign was, and my whole town freaked out. So, you
Dude.
it, it was a big deal. So that was an interesting component, doing urban planning while being from a town of 400 people.
I don't even imagine, like, how do you have content? Like, So was this your first time on? This was your first time on public transportation when you were in college. Like there wasn't like a like anything close. Like I mean, did you guys go on field trips or on a bus or like?
Yeah, I mean, just like the school bus, we
Yeah,
had
it's
been
not
on
quite the
trips,
same
but
though.
what yeah, and like the place we would go is we would go the thing that my town has is a nice gas station. We're almost exactly the halfway point between Binghamton and Jamestown, and we've got a nice gas station. Best gas station pizza I've ever had.
Let's go.
The other thing we have is craft cheese.
Nice.
So that's the big thing. So like you'd get all excited, like, hey, we've got a field trip. You know where you're going? The cheese factory. And it was about a half mile up the road. They'd bus you up there. You would do a tour of the cheese factory, and that was the end of the field trip.
So was this like a like was the town working at the cheese factory?
The
Is that
vast
how?
majority of them, yeah.
Okay.
You were kind of either a teacher, if you were, I don't want to say lucky, but like employment at the gas station was coveted because it was basically just two people. So it's like if you wanted a shift in there, like it was a hot commodity. It was really difficult to get in there. Um, so yeah, teachers, two people that got the gas station job, and then the cheese factory was pretty big where it even like drew people from outside of the town. But yeah, that was kind of three options where I'm from. So I mean that's kind of why I got shipped away, ended up at Wyoming Seminary was, it was just not much in that town, like not even just as far as athletics goes, but as far as, opportunities. So my parents, seeing that I wanted something a little more, got me out of there so that I had the opportunity to experience more.
Yeah, so you went to Wyoming Seminary, and then I guess what was that process like, I guess, going back? Was that something that you just kinda missed home, like, you wanted to be around home again, or
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that went into it. Like obviously going to a prep school's got quite a bit of a cost to it, so that was a difficult thing. Like I am definitely, if you're splitting the world into haves and have nots, I'm definitely not on the good half of that, as far as the family I came from. So wrestling was, it was taxing on my family as much as people say like wrestling, hey, it's a blue collar, it's a tough sport. More and more, it's getting to be a little wealthier of a sport because it's like there's crazy resources out there that you can have for it, and they cost money. And I think more and more we're seeing as you access those resources, you're going to be better at wrestling. And my parents, for better or for worse, they never told me no when it came to wrestling. If I wanted to go to a camp, they were going to find a way, whether it was overtime or it was putting a lien on the house or whatever it was doing. I was going to get to go to whatever tournament, whatever camp, whatever private lesson I wanted. Um, but as I was at seminaries as a junior, so going into my senior year, I kind of acknowledged this. I, had a little guilt about it. And I was like, okay, how can I still, like, I don't want to be at home. I understand that I can't accomplish my dreams there. I was like, where can I go that would save any bit of money that would still, get me to my dream? And RTCs, I don't want to say we're just becoming a thing, but we're definitely becoming a little more known. You know, 2014, they were becoming a little more known. Kyle Snyder had just gone to the Olympic Training Center. So, like, skipping your senior year was a thing. So,
yeah.
I was like, maybe I'm just not going to wrestle my senior year. Maybe I'm just going to train in an RTC and go for it. But then, it just worked out like, hey, I can, there's the RTC right there in Ithaca. Um, Lansing High School is pretty good at wrestling. They had this guy named Kyle Dake. So, I could continue that. So that just worked out. It was kind of the perfect storm. It wasn't anything crazy like, hey, I was recruited up here, I'm doing this, and that. It was just like there was a financial need to spend a little less. And I was like, how can I do that while still training at the highest level? RTCs were the answer. Where's the closest RTC? Oh, it's in Ithaca. Okay. Can I find a way to wrestle here, in high school legally still? If not, whatever. I'm just going to train, get better at wrestling. But, we found a way to get it done.
Yeah, and you were able to, be a state champ, which, was one of your goals. I actually looked back. Do you ever look back at like some of the old like filming yourself, or it's been 10 years, right, since you graduated high school, or almost 10 years.
And
Do
years.
you know what interview I'm talking about? I think you just won a state title, and this lady was like kind of talking about, hey, like walk us through that win. You were talking about how like you kind of studied some film and you saw the shrug was going to be there. You hit the
Yeah.
shrug twice and he was good on top. Were you kind of like game planning for that, or was that something like you and your coaches that kind of talked about? Do you think back at this at all, like 10 years ago?
Not so much now. When like after it first happened, it was something that was exciting for a
Yeah.
while. Now it's not something I think about, but I do remember that. So I had a bunch of surgeries from my senior year of high school to senior year of college. So 6 year span, I had 8 surgeries. And so it was tough. And I think every one changed my wrestling style a little bit. Where I think from like 15 to 17 years old, I moved a little better. I was really low in my stance. I love shooting low singles. I had my first knee surgery going into my senior year, and it really impaired how I could move. So we worked a lot on slide bys. I don't want to say Coach Harrington taught it to me, but he helped me perfect it. And so that was just something like, hey, because of this injury, I am, adjusting my style a little bit, adding this into the repertoire, using it a lot more. So I think I used it. I teched the kid in the first round, and I think I used it 5, 6 times on that kid. So it was something that it was in the arsenal, it's getting used. And then once I knew I had span in the finals, we were going back and watching some of his film, and Coach Harrington tells me, he's like, hey, off the whistle every time, it's hard righty club, which is my good side. And I was like, sweet, I'm going to stick my neck out there and let him club me, and I'm going to send it. And I did. Again, knowing that he was really good on top, we had a plan to build a lead. And so he's like, all right, if you take him down, we're going to cut him right away. I cut him. He clubs me again. I slide him by again. I remember looking up at the clock, and it was 6 seconds in, and I was up 4-1. I was like, wow, this is an amazing game plan.
Yeah, that's pretty epic, man. Like, what happened the rest of the match? Because I couldn't find the match.
So, cut him again, couldn't take him down, ended the first period 4-2.
Okay.
I choose neutral, take
Okay.
him down, ride him out. So this also, again, had knee surgery that year, didn't train that much. I didn't even wrestle until Christmas. So I was not in the best shape.
Yeah.
So
Did you hit him with that slide by again?
no, I actually scored on a low single that time.
Okay.
Third takedown was low single, and then rode him out. Third period 6-2, and I see. So his freshman year, he won a state title over Matteo DiVincenzo. I think ended up being a 3-timer. Losing the third period, puts that thumb in the air, takes top, and pins him.
How does he
And
pin him with like
cradle.
what? Cradle? Okay.
He's
So is he kind
freakishly
of a long guy?
strong. Yeah, lanky, freakishly strong. I swear his fingers are like 8 inches long. Cross-face cradle. And so, I'm there and I know what's coming, but I'm looking, I see him put that thumb in the air, like, okay, here we go. Here we go. Don't get pinned. Um,
That's
so
like the worst thing you can think too sometimes is like, all right, I'm just gonna not get pinned because
yes,
then you're not trying to get out, you're just trying to hold your base, and then
which
that's
is
how you get cradled.
100% what I did. And I was super close numerous times to getting cradled. And I just remember like it's exciting to win a state title, but I remember being so disappointed that I got ridden out so I ended up winning 6-2. That was the final. And I
Nice.
remember like, again, you get ridden out in like the biggest match of your life at that point. And I just looked over to Chris and I just kind of shrugged and I was like, well, I did it.
No stall calls though.
No stall calls, and shout out to Derek for having an awesome college career. When he was coaching at Buffalo, I ran into him a few times, and he mentioned he's like, "Oh man, I wish I had that match back." I'm like, "What do you mean, wish you had it back? Like you ended up being way better than me, man. Like good for you."
Well, it's interesting too, like talking to people that used to wrestle in either like high school or college. And at the time, it's like you can't be friends with this guy. But after, and they're like actually cool people, it's I don't know, it's cool. Like it's
Yeah,
cool talking to them later in life.
yeah. No, I think that's an awesome thing in the wrestling community. I mean, back to high school again. My sophomore year, there's a kid that won a state title as a freshman, Tony Recco. So, you win a state title as a freshman, you're on cloud nine, man. Like you think you're going to be, 4-timer, going to big time school and everything. And sophomore year, I tear his ACL. And, I'm like, wow, like this kid's going to hate me like forever. And then senior year, he was in my state bracket and I beat him again. Like this kid's died. I ruin his career sophomore year. I tear his ACL. He misses the whole year. Then we're in the same bracket senior year and I beat him. Me, him, and his big brother, awesome friends now.
Nice.
So it's like it's incredible how, the wrestling world is just that way. How it's like, man, I was thinking at the time that I've ruined this kid's life. I'm the worst thing that happened to him. And I was like, no, we talk all the time. He's got an awesome life. He's doing incredible. We're friends.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where it's like you can't get past it. It's my dreams or your dreams, and I mean, you can't really be nice and be like, yeah, go ahead, like win this match. It's funny you're talking about. So there's a kid that transferred in from a junior college to CSUB, and he was, I think, I don't know if he was state champ or state finalist. And California JUCO is a little bit different than national JUCO. It's just a state tournament.
Yeah.
But we were roommates, and I wasn't sure exactly. Sorry, dogs are barking. I wasn't sure exactly what weight I was going to go, if I was going to stay at 84s or go back down to 74s. I ended up going back down, and that was his weight. But, we were roommates, and he was talking about, yeah, like I think I got this spot. And then I ended up going down, and then we had to wrestle each other off. And, we were roommates. So it's like after, we had like a little social, whereas his parents came and visited. And I met his parents. It's like, oh, this is my roommate. We had just wrestled off, and I beat him. And he's like, yeah, this is the guy who took my dreams away. He said it kind of like a joke, but
Yeah.
it's funny because, guys get married and stuff like that. And I saw him a couple years ago. Actually, it might have just been last year at a wedding. And it's awesome. Like he's got a bunch of kids, and he's living down at Huntington Beach, and he surfs every day, and he's got a good job. And it's like, all right, like life worked out for you, like I don't feel as bad.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny how those things happen. And I think sometimes like you stay in wrestling, it's harder to let go of those. And, I think that's something that, at least in coaching, it has helped me because it's like, hey, I can acknowledge I failed at almost all the goals I had, where it's like, I think some people hold on to that and they're still trying to like live a little vicariously or, get that extra little 1%. Or I think there are some people who maybe don't want someone who have gotten better than them, where it's like, man, I have no problem admitting I wasn't the best. I failed at a lot. I wasn't close to accomplishing a lot, where it's like, I've let that go and I'm just trying to like understand the dreams of my athletes and help them get to it. So I think it's interesting, moving forward, depending on what you're in and what you do, just like how everyone handles it, where I've definitely gotten now, and maybe like when I was first starting to coach, it really bothered me. Like, hey, how are these coaches or how are these athletes going to listen to me and believe that I can get them to their dream when I didn't live it? Where now I don't want to say I'm a veteran, but I'm 6 years in now, and I'm much more comfortable to be like, hey man, yeah, I love your dream. I didn't accomplish it. I wasn't close, but I can help you get there, and I can help you get that within striking distance. And you're going to be the one to accomplish it, but we can lay out a roadmap together. So I think that's been an interesting thing in coaching is letting that all go.
Yeah, well, it's almost like it's such an ego-driven sport at times, and I think sometimes an ego is okay to have, but you can't let it get in the way of you getting better and also living the other parts of your life. Just as much as I see guys not get what they want and they can't let it go and it derails them. Same thing if you do get what you want and you can't let it go and you don't move on. I mean, there are guys I know that have done some really awesome things in the sport, but they don't do the other stuff like the marriage and the kids and have a successful career. And, maybe they get into other things like coaching or whatever, and they don't have a lot of success. And it's like, maybe part of it is just they can't let go of that part of themselves. And it's hard to empathize with people if you're so focused on yourself and what kind of you've done in the past.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, the human mind and the way it can haunt us moving forward.
Yeah. Well, hey, we've been going for a little over an hour. One question, as a younger married guy, I guess to another, what has kind of been that process? If you don't mind me asking, how do you kind of deal with the coaching side in addition to be married and like making sure you kind of have time for that as well? And moving sometimes I think is hard for not just coaches, but on their families as well. Would you mind kind of sharing a little bit about that so I can kind of pick your brain?
Yeah. I mean, Jesse hates moving more than me.
Nice.
And she will always let me know that. She always tells me like, "Hey, I support you. Take this job, but just know that I'm going to complain every step of the way while we're moving." And but I can't complain at all. She's been awesome. I have dragged her literally from coast to coast and in between. So she's been awesome following me everywhere, and she's really supportive of my dreams. And, it's like I couldn't do it without her. And that's not just, the cliche saying like I couldn't do it without her. It's like without her helping me through these things, and that's like she's always got my back and she helps me with things. And she's also an official. So I'm bouncing rules things off of her all the time, or like, hey, I need your connection for this, so she's literally helped me in so many ways with it. But I do think it's important to like set time apart. And that's one thing that working at Drexel and working for Coach Azevedo, and I'll say to, hey, whoever's going to interview for that job, just know that you're interviewing to work with the guy who understands work-life balance the best. You know, he would be the type of guy where if you told him like, oh, hey, my wife's got this big doctor's appointment on this day, but it's the same day as the match. So like, I'm going to go to the match and she's going to Uber there or something, he'd be the guy to be like, no, you need to be there with her, you know? So he understands that so well, and he made it so easy to like live that life because he wasn't the guy that locked us in the office 12 hours a day. It's like he was like, hey, you got your work done? All right, it's only 1 o'clock. Yeah, go home. You got your stuff done. You're gonna make some calls tonight. Okay, cool. Yeah, just let me know how those calls go. And he was awesome with all of that stuff. And I think that honestly like made me work harder
Yeah.
is the fact that he gave me freedom. And I was like, wow, like this guy's incredible. Like not just as a boss, but like I felt like he was a genuine friend. And I wanted to help him be successful because he was helping me so much in life. So, hey, whoever's applying for that job, like if you're looking for like work-life balance, or you have a family and you want to invest in that family, that's an awesome job to have. Cause I do think that's a tough balance. I've met many of coaches who are like, oh, coaching hurt my marriage, coaching hurt my relationship with my kids. I think it's tough, and I haven't had to deal with the kids aspect of it yet, but I will say, I think Coach Az has not only like demonstrated to me how to do it, it's like spring is a big time for baseball. One of his son's a big baseball player. He wasn't missing games. He was there. He trusted his assistants, and I think that it's going to teach me as a head coach too, like, hey, if my future kid has a game, I need to trust my assistant. That's why I hired them, you know, but also like, it's okay. Hey, we have lives, these wrestlers, while you have them, you're asking them to be super strict and super disciplined for 4 to 5 years. While at the same time, coaching is the rest of your life. You can't lock down and do nothing but wrestling the rest of your life. You got to open up a little bit. And I think that's something he showed me really, really well, not only from him demonstrating it, but the things that he allowed me to do. That was an awesome experience.
And I think that the guys on the team, they look at you as a role model. So like how you treat your family and how you treat your wife and how you eventually treat your kids, they see that they're going to subconsciously, intake that and apply it to their lives too.
No, I 100% absolutely. And I think in this sport, we're not just trying to get great wrestlers, we're trying to grow great men. And I think, teaching them about those relationships and what that sacrifice looks like is super important. So, yeah, it's a big thing and it's tricky. You're never going to nail it, but always working on it.
Awesome. Well, Coach, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, man. I'm glad we got a chance to talk and, kind of share a little bit about this process. Dude, super excited to kind of follow you. Before we stop, is there anything you kind of want to add last minute?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me on, and I think I gave a lot of shout outs during this, to people who have mentored me and stuff. But, also just want to thank God for giving us this opportunity, and creating this earth and creating wrestling.
Awesome, man. Thank you. That was episode 85 with Jimmy Overhiser. Man, super excited to have him on the show and be able to get a chance to pick his brain. It sounds like Mercyhurst is going to be a really cool place, especially where it's at in Pennsylvania. Really excited to share this episode with you guys. If you guys can, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on our social media pages on Instagram, Facebook. We're on TikTok. And again, thank you guys for following the show, and we'll see you guys next time.